Hey there. Thanks for checking out my live studio broadcast. I guess that's what we would call it. Essentially, I'm using the live feature on YouTube to do quick little videos, about minutes, on what I've been doing with Turo to kind of keep you up to date. It's by no means anything fancy or exciting as far as special effects or anything along that line. It's essentially me sitting down with a microphone and hopefully you can hear some of it and a little webcam and going from there. So I've got my Outlander booked out for 10 days. Now, with that said, I needed to do a little paperwork to kind of get everything in order. And this is one of those things that is a hurdle, and you might do it at the last minute, but it's a good idea to get it out of the way and get your car ready to go on the road. So, what you need to do is put together a little file folder to go into the glove box with all the pertinent information that that driver might need in the event they get pulled over. So, what Turo is asking, and it makes perfect sense, you have to include a liability card from Turo. So, you need to print one of these off. So, that's what the guy looks like right here. And down below, it's got accident information and who to contact for Turo's roadside assistance and things along that line. So that's everything there as far as a quick, handy little reference, plus everything constable would need in the event that they were pulled over. So that's one right there. Now you also have to put together for the individual for every time the car goes out, um, the Turo car sharing agreement. So they have a copy of that. So again, if they get pulled over, they can hand that over to the constable and say, yes, I am authorized to drive the car. Here's my essential rental agreement. If you were renting a car in the past through Tilden or Budget, they would have, 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't, but they would have it in the glove box, a little notice that said, hey, please refer to the carbon copy of the rental agreement, which was included when they picked the vehicle up. They usually put it in an envelope and hand it off to the customer with the keys. This is essentially that same process, just with 6 pages. So no carbon copy. But again, you'd have a copy on Turo. And it's going to have this start, finish date. So in other words, the time the vehicle had to get back. So if they've had the thing for 3 weeks and they only booked it for a week and they get pulled over, they pull this stuff out to try and smooth it over. Well, they're going to know that they were only authorized to have the vehicle for that time period. Gives the license plate, the VIN number, pickup location, the return location, a reservation number for reference. Again, if they have to go online and check it. It also makes it clear that there's a cap on the kilometers and they get charged, and a couple other little things. Again, all stuff that makes perfect sense when you kind of figure it. So they go together. So I put the insurance, so that liability card, the rental agreement together. Now I had a few things. What I did is I talked to my AI and I said, well, what else is required when we're doing this? And we need to put a copy of the ownership. Now, the dilemma with that is that the ownership has an awful lot of personal information that you may not want to have readily available to someone who's rented your car. Makes sense, right? So, what most folks do is they put it into a sealed envelope. So, again, it's nice and sealed and tight. So, the ownership is in there along with a liability card. So, a personal liability card that's attached to me, the owner of the vehicle. So, the liability card for Turo is for the client. So that's their insurance coverage in the event of an accident. That's the one that will be going through. This is my insurance coverage. So this is something, if I got into an accident, this is what I would be going through. The two aren't the same. So don't get confused by that. It's not going to cause any issues, especially when it's presented this way. So you want to make that very clear. Again, rental agreement makes it clear that that's the insurance that's covering the car. Now, on the envelope, I did a little overkill, essentially. So what I've done is I've added in the vehicle permit, my broker link, the Canadian Interprovincial Liability Card, along with the reference number for it and the expiry date in the event that they're looking at it kind of going, well, is this a legitimate car on the road, right? I also added in my CA membership, which Turo offers a roadside assistance program, which is, I guess, fine. I've never used it, but I've used CA in the past. So I know they're pretty decent. I might be yelling into the mic and I do apologize. Again, I'm getting used to the distance and things along that line as far as how the equipment is. But let's say the client needs to get a tire changed, or they got, because it's a new vehicle to them, they didn't realize that they left the overhead lamp on at night. So they've come out to crank the car and it doesn't start. And it's probably due to operator error. They left the lights on or something along that line. But they need a boost. CA does it. Let's say they weren't aware of where that gas gauge was. CA will run gas out to them. I think it's 10 or 15 bucks for free to get you to the gas station. So that's pretty decent. So other than a towing service and some other stuff, there's other things there that in the event of an issue, it makes the job a little bit easier as far as that's concerned. And again, I put down their 800 number and it goes in there. And then of course I put my contact down below. You want to give me a call if you have to open the envelope, right? So again, that's where the constable would pick up the phone and say, hey, ideally in a perfect world, I've got so-and-so pulled over, or I've got so-and-so in a ditch, or I've got so-and-so who can't find the car and we found it. So they're going to open that up. And then I'm going to know that something happened where someone had to go in and check it. Now, the other one is you don't want to put original documentation in there. Now, if you look on your ownership here in Ontario, down below, right here, it does allow for a copy to be in the vehicle. So in other words, you don't have to keep the original document in the car. That can go in the file so that nobody can transfer the vehicle without you knowing it. In other words, I'm not saying that my motor vehicle department couldn't have a problem, but they could. They could look at that and say, oh, that scribble could be my name, and I've just sold the car to so-and-so, and it's probably on Facebook. So I'm just not just saying. So that kind of cuts that down because it's very hard to transfer a car with a black and white copy because clearly it's an issue. Then they need to provide ID if they wanted to reprint. So it's one of those things where it's just a safe way of keeping you out of hot water as far as that's concerned. Now, liability card, the insurance company sends me like a packet of these things. So it's one of those things where you don't need to make a copy, just tear one off. Now, the other vehicles that I have on there, which is my car that I like, I enjoy, I run a black marker over that one. The only thing they really need is the VIN number and the information on the Mitsubishi. They don't need to know the rest of the information, right? Broker link and the policy number is attached to that vehicle, so it's fine. So again, that's just one of those things where I don't want that headache of someone pulling the VIN number and going nefarious on it. But the odds of that are probably pretty low, and I'm probably going to be able to track them down in the event that there's a problem anyways. So something that you got to do before you get your vehicle out on the road. So it's one of those things that as a newbie, I was going through the checklist and went, oh, dear, I should probably get that done, right? So these are now going to go into a very nice little renter's portfolio, which I got from the dollar store. So this one was on sale because it's got a little bump on the edge. So I got it for less than $1. So that's a bit of a bargain. That was a win for me that day. Doesn't take much. So everything goes into the little file folder here, and we're ready to roll, right? Now, right now, my system's really simple because I'm working with one car. Now, if you were working with 5 cars, which I think is my goal, you'd want to have 5 individual file folders for times when they're going in and out, and then the rental agreement with the person that's taking the vehicle at the time. So this is an administrative item that's kind of important. Now, as strange as this sounds, I don't know if the US guys do it, but in Canada, what really annoys a constable when he's got you down the road and it's snowing and it's raining and it's hailing out and the whole thing, which is never going to be a beautiful sunny day that they nail you. It's going to be one of those things where it's going to be like 10 o'clock at night. He's coming off the end of his shift. It's going to be, and if you don't have the paperwork, it's going to be like a fun time. So if you have the paperwork, and I've experienced myself in the past where you kind of go, okay, yeah, that it is what it is. You were doing that. But sometimes when you just hand them over a portfolio with your driver's license, say everything is there. There's no headaches. There's nothing for you to worry about. Take care of it. It's fine. It is what it is. Stay relaxed and polite. Sometimes you'll get a warning. Sometimes you'll get maybe a little bit of a break. So that's why I do it like this. So it saves a headache for somebody else. and it's something that keeps everything nice and smooth. So that's one of those things that I would probably suggest. The other one, and I'm going to show you something. So stay right there. It's going to be exciting. So I installed a tracking device. Now, I'm not going to tell you where I put it or how I installed it, but I'm going to share what service I'm using because I think you're going to find it to be pretty impressive because the price point was very, very reasonable. Oop, losing all the documentation. So this is a Saline 11 4G GPS tracker. Now this is designed to charge up. So you plug her in and it's good for about 3 weeks, maybe 4, right? It's a low power draw. It reports to me where the vehicle is about every 15 minutes if you want to do that, right? So that's one of those things to keep the power down on it. I don't know why I'm showing you the empty box because I've already installed it, but it looks like a little black box. It's about the size of my hand, so we're not talking huge, and it has a USB cable, and it has a USB-C, I think, if I remember correctly, to it. So what I did, the wise little guy I am, because I didn't want to buy the big kit that you install physically into the car, but this one, I don't want to be running out and pulling it off the vehicle and bringing it in to charge it. Or a good example is I'm going to have it out for 10 days. Right, I've had it out before and it's been running around and it could be at the 3 week mark and it might be just getting to the point where this thing is dead on power. So if you go to your local RV store or Princess Auto, you will find one of these and they're going to be old stock. Let's see if we can get that. So that is a 10-inch extension, 10-foot extension cord for a power point for a cooler or to run a TV or whatever you're going to do out camping. Now it has a plug-in port for your cigarette lighter or your power pop. So that's where it is. What I did with this one is I cut this off and I ran the wire to a power source in the vehicle. So something that's always powered or something that's always powered when the vehicle is on, right? Because you got 3 weeks. Like all you're doing is trickle charging it while it's running. So it just means you don't have to maintain it, which is great. So this one here, I ended up wiring into something in the car. It's a mystery. So if you're renting the car, maybe you'll wonder where it is and it could be a tough one to find. It probably not if you're a professional. You're going to steal my car anyways, but you'll probably come across it. But it's one of those things where now I can have a direct wire into it, and then I plug an adapter, which allows me to put the USB-C into it, and it has a little red flashing light, so it tells me that it's going and it's working properly. So I'm not going to do an install video because there's a lot of them out there. It's pretty straightforward to install an auxiliary power point, not rocket science. Put it anywhere you want. And then this one, instead of putting it outside the vehicle, in other words, this is designed to sit with a magnet under the vehicle on a floor somewhere, right? So slap it on, vehicle travels. If I had multitudes of vehicles and I wanted to just have 3 or 4 of these out because not all the cars went out at the same time, I wanted to save on a monthly charge, I would probably consider that. But now, because I only have one vehicle, I've got one subscription, this is going to be in that vehicle all the time. Now, to get one that's a permanent wired, are we doing that? To get one that's permanently wired, you're usually looking about 150 plus. So that's the gear. And then you're going to get into, I think, probably about an hour's worth of labor, maybe less, depending on where you're putting it. So Canada, the labor in the shop is $125. So it's one of those things where this you can do on your own without causing any issues. It did take me about half an hour to put everything together because I did it nice and clean and tidy. The monthly on this, which I found very nice, is about $9.95 with no contract. So there's no commitment to it. So in my 6-month period where I can kind of review and say, hey, am I going to continue with Turo? And I can cancel this, which is great. This piece off Amazon was $17.95. So with taxes, and I get my little bonus because I'm a member. You want to do that. So it's a nice little feature from that standpoint. So you're out first around about $30, which is very reasonable. So that's something to think about. The app is on my phone, which I will tell you is annoying. So it's one of those things where, so it's got the little indicator on it to say it's pinging and it's live. So you can see it's got the little pink dot right there. So it's up and running. And sometimes it'll log in, and sometimes it'll ask me for an email and password. So it's a little irritating from that standpoint. But it's cool in the fact that it pings on my phone if the vehicle is going over the speed limit of 20 kilometers. So it'll give me a little heads up from that standpoint. The other one is it pings me. In other words, it makes that wonderful little noise if the vehicle is going out of my region, and then out of that region, then out of that region. So in other words, if it gets to Durham, I've been pinged 4 times. So it just tells me the direction where the vehicle is going. I can make that 15-minute ping to 30 seconds. So in other words, I can almost get real-time travel on where that vehicle is. And it's not meant to be creepy. Turo actually makes that really clear in the rental agreement that there's possibly a tracking device with the vehicle, whether that's OnStar or another service. I went with this one because I've got an older vehicle and it was easy and simple to do and affordable. So again, there's a host of products out there on Amazon to look at. The reviews down below, I find they're AI generated to the most part. So you want to look for something with really bad spelling and go, okay, well, there you go. That's the guy. Or someone has put photos up of it. But I tried it before I wired it in because, again, it's a standalone system. And it worked great with no issues at all. So it's one of those things where I would highly recommend that. And that's one of those things where we're talking not just safeties and tires and getting the vehicle clean and tidy and taking care of some of the imperfections, even though it's a 10-year-old car, it's still got marks and scratches on it. But to make it presentable and something that you could drive safely without any issues, you need to look at a few other little things that are really clerical and administrative, which is things like registering for a tracking system, like getting something like that on the go. Very important. My broker seemed to like the idea. I'm doing the play with the little thing. My apologies. Seemed to like this. So it's a good idea from that standpoint. The other one I'm going to suggest to you is I use Economical Insurance in Canada. So right there's my policy with it. Cool little thing, and it might be an issue down the road. It might bite me in the butt. But Economical is actually the insurance that Turo uses. So when I'm talking to my broker and they're going, well, what is the policy on that? Or how does that relate to Turo? They're the actual insurer. So they're not calling anybody and saying, hey, hold on a second, or do we have a gap in coverage, or is there a problem with this? That's a nice feature to it. So if you're thinking of getting into Turo and you're going, okay, well, I'm with one Anissa, or maybe you're with a State Farm or another company that has to kind of work not against, but there's a timeline to things. Whereas because everything's internal in one insurance company, they're different departments. So I'm not saying it's like the easiest thing in the world, but it means that if I've got to go through a claim through Turo, I'm already a client. So I'm not really going to have to go through a lot of hurdles in the event of, they're going back and forth and talking to such and such. It's like, well, you have to go to the desk to the left and talk to that guy. Like that's really what it's going to boil down to. So that kind of gives you an idea there as far as the billing statements are concerned, as far as that. Now, my policy on my my Outlander also has a little rider. So this is something that I would probably suggest. And it was suggested not by my broker, but by my broker's, I guess, manager or boss. They came back and they said, look, there's an additional attachment to this, much like something like gap insurance, which we'll talk about later. So it's an additional attachment to the insurance in the event that there's an error with Turo's insurance or the owner's insurance, if they opted to go that route. I understand that's an option if you've got a very good policy and you've got a higher end product. Sometimes they will cover rental cars and they will cover Turo. But let's say Turo made a mistake and they didn't confirm it, or there's an issue with regulatory problems and it wasn't quite right. And I've got a rider on that to cover me in the event that I fall in that little gray area, that little crack of insurance that normally someone would get pooched in. And that, strangely enough, only ran me about $75. So I'm going to probably suggest that if you're out there and you've got an older car or even a newer car, it's a safe thing to do. So if there's a mistake where the photograph of the driver's license was verified by Turo and it turned out not to be valid, well, that's on Turo now. Now, their policy would be their problem, which that would be that $75 in the event that they don't cover it. I've got a rider that'll say, okay, well, let's resolve that right now. So that's one of those things that I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know how effective it is because I've never had to make a claim. I hope not to, knock on wood. So we'll see from that standpoint. But at some point, I think as the vehicles go out, my goal is to try and do 10 days a month. I would love to do more. Like that wouldn't be an issue from that standpoint. But my goal is to go from that route. And with that, I think you end up having a certain amount of risk. And it's just a matter of time before somebody ends up bumping into a tree or knocking somebody's mirror off in a parking lot, or there's going to be something that comes up. So it's just nice to know that everything's in your little envelope. And then you've got your little file folder, little dossier to go there. So you've got everything all covered, and you've already confirmed everything with your broker. You've already confirmed everything with Turo. Now, Turo, just so you're aware of it, isn't exactly very communicative. So if you're out there and you're going, okay, who do I talk to? Well, there really isn't a 1-800 Turo. There isn't really a service desk. You have to kind of go back to the website and you have to kind of dig through their search function and kind of go, okay, well, how does that work? And you have to kind of work on it on your own. There are a couple other little outlets you can go to and check it, but to be honest with you, you're doing the exact same thing. You're searching. So hopefully I'm helping you out a little bit by putting some content out, and you kind of go, okay, well, that was valuable, or you're going to go, well, I already knew that. But again, I'm starting from the ground zero with just one car, and we're going from there. So that's what I've been up to. So I'm hoping for a 10-day booking. Now, again, nothing's guaranteed. I've sent out emails to verify. They haven't really returned them. So again, they haven't canceled it. There hasn't been an issue from that standpoint. So I'm assuming it's a go, and we'll find out tomorrow how things roll. Now I have to go out and do a photo shoot of the car. So these are the photos that are going to be sent to Turo before the rental. So in other words, they can say, well, this is what the vehicle is, like I say, this is what the vehicle is going out. These are the kilometers on the odometer. It's got a full tank of gas. Show a picture of that. We do basically the exact same profile photos, but we do a little closer, so a little more detailed. And then we take shots of the tires, shots of the rims. I do a shot of the undercarriage. I do a shot of the roof. Again, there are some videos out there that kind of show you this. I will probably get into it down the road, or I'll get into a nice little, maybe we'll figure out a way to show some things on the screen, and I'll show you some photos of what I've been doing. And then that goes off to Turo, and then they'll say, okay, well, that's the file in the event of an accident. We can say, wow, you're right. It was a blue Outlander before they took it. Yeah, it's not the same color anymore, right? So it's things along that line. You want shots of the interior as well, and unfortunately, you can't take a shot of smell, but so you can go back later and say, hey, you know what? I found the little bug. All right. Oh, that was the phone. What's going on? That is my 15-minute pin on my Outlander. So it is still in my parking lot. So that's nice. But it does that report every once in a while. It's random. I don't know why it does it. It just says, hey, I'm still here. Power's good. So again, that's a nice little feature. I will probably get into showing you what you can see on that app in another video, where we'll talk about maintaining the fleet, just seeing where things are and keeping track of your assets as far as that's concerned. And maybe we'll even get into things like title protection. And we'll talk a little bit about GAP. We'll talk a little bit about, I guess, abstract thoughts just come to mind on that. How to protect your identity. And maybe we'll get into a couple things along that line. And maybe we'll even talk credit, and we'll talk credit scores, because I found that kind of fascinating over the last little while. And I think that's going to impact the rental market. I have a couple friends that are in the car business, and they're telling me that there's a fair amount of extending the loans on lenders, which is the first step that most lenders will do. So if you're dealing with Scotiabank, or you're dealing with CIBC, or a sub lender. They don't necessarily want to take your car, but they'll give you 90 days at a reduced payment, or they'll go a little bit longer and they'll just move that 72-month term. It sounds crazy when you say it, 72 months. They can go up to 107, I think now. So you're talking like crazy financing, almost a mortgage onto a vehicle. So that's why we'd want to talk about that as far as that's concerned. And they're saying that right now there's an awful lot of folks that are taking advantage of that in order to offset budget because things have gone up in the last little while. So they may have seen a hike in their insurance. They may have seen a hike in gas. They've seen a hike in food. So they're going, well, I got to stretch this out. So I think probably in the next 3 months to 9 months, those vehicles will probably be going back to a dealership. So someone will trade it in, take some of that negative equity, and maybe move it into a Hyundai Accent, which is really hard to do. So it's one of those things where I think we'll see the return of the beater car or the return of that 5-year-old runabout to be able to get out of some of this debt that some folks are in. I think Turo as a renting platform will probably do well in a downtime. And the main reason being is our lifestyles don't change. So I still want to go out to my mother's place. A lender would want to do that. So a driver is going to say, okay, I still want to go someplace nice. I still want to go visit family. I still want to be able to go on a road trip. We're not broke. Like they're not poor or desolate or, living in a tent. They are still middle class, but now they've got maybe the car that they've been hanging on to for 10 years or 15 years. And it's just an A to B car to get to work and get groceries. And it's not meant for long drives, which everyone's been there, I think, at the beginning stage of life, and you're just kind of trying to get by. But you'll still have a little money tucked aside to be able to say, okay, Christmas time, I got to take a rental car and we're going to go to Owen Sound, or you're going to take a rental car and go to Ottawa, or, go visit relatives, and at least have something that is going to get there. I think that's where Turo and probably the rental industry overall will see a bump. And it's probably going to be in the next year or so. So that's just my opinion on that. So again, it's one of those things where if you're just looking at Turo for the first time, that's one of the thoughts that I had was kind of like, if you have a decent car and it's sitting for a fair bit of time, it might as well be utilized. You might as well get it out there. It's depreciating anyways. I have to do an oil change time-wise, regardless of the kilometers. So it's one of those things where you kind of look, you kind of go, doing the service, I'm paying the insurance. It's a depreciating asset, so I'm losing 5 to 15% of the value over a 12-month period, which that's just the nature of it. It's not like you can say, hey, a car is going to go up in value as a collectible, at least not without looking for it. So we're coming up to the 30-minute mark. If you've got any questions or you're just starting out in Turo, you kind of go, hey, Keith, I found this great feature that this is going to save you time and energy. You send me a little, little email or the chat feature there. I think it's over on the side. You can just, or down below, you make a comment and just say, hey, this is some of the things I've thought about. Maybe you're in Southern Ontario and you've got a car and you're on Turo and you've gone through some nightmares. Maybe you'd like to give me a little heads up and say, hey, you know what? I understand what you're saying, but this is the real thing that happens when there's a problem. Love to hear that and see, what your outcome was, what the delays were, or, did it not work out? I don't always want to hear the glorious, look at me, I'm making a mint of money and I've managed to get a Ferrari and a BMW and, this and that. I don't think that's terribly realistic anyways, but hey, if that's what you got and you want to talk about it, that's cool too. But if you say, hey, I've got the same thing, I'm running a Malibu, or you've got yourself a little truck you got up there, and these are the kind of the stories you've got, love to hear it. So that's one of those things I'm looking for. If you're a person in the automotive industry, because I'm a bit of a car guy, I've been a car guy for a long time, and you're going, you know what? I have a platform. Maybe you're a finance manager, or maybe you're one of those guys in the banking system who would like to give me a little tidbit of information on things that might be helpful in the event that I want to go finance a car for Turo, because there's some hurdles there that I'm aware of. I haven't gone through the process, but maybe someone out there can say, hey, we go through it on a regular basis and it's an easy solution, or here's the run through. I know there's a lot of folks out there that do courier work or delivery with foods, things along that line, that are kind of in the same kind of world as Turo, taking a cheaper rental vehicle I know that's a common occurrence in some of the bigger centers. Maybe you could give me a little heads up and say, hey, you know what, this is the standards of the cars that we're getting into. Maybe you've got some stories there where you're going to go, you know what, there was free food in the trunk. Or maybe you're going to get in and say, you know what, I couldn't believe how clean that, Mitsubishi Mirage was, and I paid $17 a day for it. I like to hear stuff like that too, and just go from there. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time and listening to my rant or my little helpful little tidbit. I know 30 minutes is a bit of a stretch sometimes on some of the topics, but again, I'm trying to keep things moving along as kind of things pop up, and we'll go from there. Have a pleasant and enjoyable day, and we'll talk to you later. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn it off. End stream. Oh, not yet.